الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Good morning. It's time for Understanding Islam, brought to you by the Understanding Islam Dawah Foundation.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Almighty God from Satan, the rejected enemy. With the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, all praise is due to Almighty God, the Lord and the cherisher of all the worlds. I greet the believing audience with the greetings of peace, of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today I brought back a guest that's been here before, Brother Ayyub Abdul Raheem. I like to give him the greeting of Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And today we have really a fascinating show. He and I, been friends for about a year or so, and we talked about doing this program, and it is about his life really before Islam. And we're going to talk about how Islam can erase racism out of a human being's life. And Brother Ayyub here will tell you today that he used to be under the influence of the Ku Klux Klan, big opponent or big one that advocated to their ideas and philosophies. And I didn't really know this about him till just here recently, that he was that involved in the Ku Klux Klan. And so he's one of my best friends. So we thought this would make a good program today, good for Dawah, because we are in the South here where the Ku Klux Klan used to really ride when I was a young man. And we're going to talk to him today about how he moved from the philosophies of the Ku Klux Klan to Islam. And so with further ado, I'll give you the greeting again, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And I guess, just tell us a little bit, because me growing up here in the South, I have my own memories and how things were when I was growing up, and I grew up in the 60s here. And you grew up in Savannah.
Correct. I grew up South Georgia, Savannah, Georgia.
Okay, so how did you come about to fall under this type of influence?
Well, a lot had to do with, I guess, the situation at the time. I grew up, like I said, I come in around the late 70s, early 80s. There was still a lot of tension from segregation of schools. Every school had barbed wire fence around them. Then, the ideology of my parents, I adopted a lot of that. My dad, he had just come back from Vietnam. He'd been exposed to a lot of stuff there, and so he blamed a lot of his issues on different minorities, and so that was a big influence on me. Also, I was isolated from minority cultures. I was, constantly being told I'm a white boy, I need to be with white people, and I need to be amongst my own. And like I say, growing up in the South, I was always told that I'm of a pure race. That.
Now, who were telling you these things?
Just everybody I associate with. Neighbors. I lived in a white neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember seeing my first other colored person, whether Asian, African American, or anything, till I was, I guess, in middle school maybe, because I went to private schools.
Really?
So I was really isolated from those things. So I would hear, especially from my dad, who worked out in public. He would tell me how, the black man's after his job, or how Asians can't drive, and just a lot of stereotypes.
So you heard a lot of that in the home also.
Oh yeah, and then my dad was, like I said, I look up to my dad. I mean, I still do in many ways, but he was more of on the extreme side. I didn't, and this is gonna sound ridiculous, but we never ate fried chicken. Only black people ate fried chicken. Wow. We ate baked chicken or broiled chicken. I mean, that's how extreme it was.
So you discriminated against the chicken because black people used to eat?
Exactly.
Wow. You all was serious then.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And I mean, even going to church, because I mean, like I said, I was raised up in a church. Like I said, the first real black person I talked to was in church, and like I said, I went to an all-white church. We had this black man show up one day, and he stayed. And my dad, I mean, like I said, it was so bad. My dad called him Token. I mean, not to his face, but he come home, hey, it was Token at church today.
He used to call a black man
Token. And he
so
said,
there was no people of color, black or
no,
Hispanic or anything like that in church?
And like I said, this member of the church, Token, he always sit in the balcony. And, speaking of balconies, I was not even allowed to sit in the balcony when I was a kid. I'd ask, hey, can I sit upstairs so I could see better looking down? Oh, no, you're white. White people don't sit in the balcony.
Wow.
And, my dad, he would, I mean, like I said, this was his ideology. He would use education to try to reinforce his beliefs, like, well, it's tradition, or the blacks and the whites get along better when they're separate. The black people want this just as much as the white people do. He said the best time in America was in the 1930s when the blacks had their own movie theaters, their own banks, they had their own doctors, and the white people had their own. They were happy, we were happy. And it's the liberals that try to ruin everything and bring it together. So, and that was the ideology I was brought up as a young kid.
Okay, so how were you justifying this in church? I mean...
Well, again,
I mean, that's one arena there that I know that should not be advocating that.
Well, I asked it, again, growing up in the church, Jesus was on the wall, he was white.
Well, yeah, he was white in my church, too.
So that was proof, that was the evidence that we were a superior being because we followed Jesus. Also, the ideology of the church at that time was the black African Americans or minorities, they were from the lineage of Cain, who was cursed by God for the murder of Abel. So we knew we were better people because we did not have the mark, because according to Genesis, Cain was given a mark.
So you're saying the Bible was justifying your prejudice?
Exactly. I was superior because I come from the lineage of Abel. African American minorities were not of the same because they come from a murderer, as it was put.
Yeah. Well, this is almost proven that the images and those statements like that in the Bible do kind of perpetuate that idea of racism. I had a Mormon one time tell me that because of that verse you just cited, that he was better than me and that God was white.
Yep. And
he justified it by that verse in the Bible.
Oh, yeah, and there's actually passages in the Book of Mormon that it states that God is white. In fact, my father had told me when I was a kid, we were studying Native American history. He says, did you talk about anything about when Columbus or any of the Europeans landed? And I said, yeah, we're talking about that they thought they were gods because they were white. He says, exactly. The Native Americans knew God was white. They had apparently the ideology that God was white, and so therefore the Europeans were accepted as gods. But if an African American had landed, it wouldn't have been that the same way.
Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit to when you were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that a lot of your thinking came from your father.
Right.
The ideas that were being told to you that kind of fed into that type of racism.
Mm-hmm.
So were there any other experiences in life that were really legitimizing your thoughts?
Yeah. When I was in 5th grade, I was tired of private schools. I wanted to get out and go to school with my friends. My parents were going through a rough time in their marriage and they're actually separated. So my mother and my sisters and we ended up in public housing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was a white kid who'd never been exposed to minority cultures. In public housing, I think there was maybe 3 or 4 other white families in this project.
Okay.
I ended up going to a school in a high crime area. In fact, there were bullet holes in the walls and the windows. And this further embraced my father's ideology of the black man is violent.
So why did your father move in there?
He didn't.
So who?
My family, my parents separated.
Okay, so you were with your mother?
I was with my mother.
Oh, okay.
So, again, so being a white kid in this neighborhood, and I tried to voice my opinion to my newfound minority associates. I'm better than you. I'm white. I'm just here until my daddy rescues me.
So you went in a public housing around African Americans, telling them you're better than them.
Oh yeah.
So how did that come off?
Oh yeah, it didn't go off very well.
A lot of butt whoopings.
Oh yeah,
and stuff.
a lot, and that reinforced my father's impression on me that minorities only know violence. And then I go to a school that again riddled with bullet holes or drive-by shootings. My father always told me, he says, the black man's uneducated. He'll never amount to anything. We're white. We have to get an education. We have to get a job, and we have to teach them, how to be civilized humans.
Okay. So it's really fascinating to me because it's really like living two lives there.
Yep.
Some of this program we're going to deal with today is how or what religion should do to try to eradicate this type of thinking. And from what you told me, you were always a church goer.
Every Saturday.
I don't see how this type of thinking can linger on in your mind if you've been told in the church about equality and the things we hear today about love, everybody, even love your enemy, and then your father and your whole family is lingering on to this type of racist mentality.
Well, again, as a young kid going to an all-white church, and like I said, we had one black man who sat up in the balcony, and then the preacher, I was taught, all people are equal, everybody's equal, love your neighbors, violence is bad. Now, I'm being told at home that I'm better than any minority because I'm nonviolent. We were always taught nonviolent, where, my father, he would tell me stories how Martin Luther King would come into town, he would get everybody's adrenaline going, and they would burn down their own property.
Yeah.
So, and then going to church, and it's love your neighbor, but let them go worship, down the street.
Worship was separate.
Right, worship is separate, exactly. And, and I asked my mom one time, I said, is there going to be two heavens? Is there going to be a minority heaven and a white heaven? And she says, no, there's just one heaven. I said, so I'm going to have a house in a white heavenly neighborhood, and they're going to have a house in a black heavenly neighborhood. No, we'll be able to intermingle. I said, why don't we do this now? And she says, and this is from my mom, and like I said, I never considered my mom a racist person.
Mm-hmm.
But she told me, she says, no, here on earth now, we're separate people, we worship separate, we do things separately, so it's better for us to remain separate.
Okay.
So, those were those stereotypes coming in from both sides, mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
Then, again, my first introduction into public school, of course, was negative.
Well, let me ask you something now, because you're talking about history of violence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know your father was like history buff, studied history.
Mm-hmm.
Did he not study, the white man's history of violence with 400 years of slavery and the Indians and Native Americans? What about that violence?
Well,
or was that justified?
Oh, it was justified. Everything's justified. Slavery was justified.
Oh, okay.
Because he says that every human being at one time, every culture were slaves. And trying to clean up his words here is being difficult. He used to make the statement and says everybody was slaves. The Jews were slaves. The Asians were slaves. White men at one time were slaves somewhere. In England and Ireland, they were slaves to a landlord. He said, but you don't hear us complaining about it, and we don't want the government to pay us back. We're not asking restitution from England for kicking us out of there and sending us over here.
Yeah. Well, there's no, you can't.
Right,
really
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, and I came home, I remember I came home one day and we were studying African-American history and slave history. And I told my dad, I said, they're teaching us in school that the Civil War was over slavery. Oh, he yelled at me. He ripped up my homework. He says, the truth is the Civil War was over states' rights. I said, yeah, that's what they said, the right to own slaves or not to own slaves. He says, no, slavery didn't come into issue until the middle of the war with a release of a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. he says, son, if you went to a car lot and you bought a car, are you going to take that car out and dog it out and damage it and beat on it and ruin it? I said, no, then I won't be able to drive it. He says, exactly. That's the same thing with the slaves. They were treated well. They were treated better than their own children in some cases. I said, well, I don't know about that, because they were showing us in school different torture devices to keep the slaves in line. And he says, no, they were treated well. You don't beat your property.
And you know, it's sad that some people still think that way.
Yep.
So now, as you got older, some kind of way you was introduced to the Klan.
Actually, what it started out before then, it started in middle school. When I got to 6th grade, I started associating with, there were kids my own age, but they had actually they come from the same type homes, and we had actually adopted the Nazi lifestyle. I was actually accepting Nazism before. It was to the point we were actually studying German. You know, we used to greet each other with a hail, you know, giving the salute, speaking German, and we believed that our ancestors were German, and that we were better than everybody. We're from the Anglo-Saxon race. We actually had armbands with swastikas on them.
Wow.
And this went all the way through middle school into high school.
I mean, so what did you all do? Meet?
Yeah, we met. We would discuss how to protect each other. There was about 40 of us, and we would actually go in the woods and what we thought was training, rappelling from trees, hiking, running. I mean, we thought, because all of our parents had told us that, you know, by now there's going to be a race war.
Did your parents know you were involved in this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
they
especially
supported
my dad.
it? I know your dad supported it.
No, my mom didn't. By this time, my mom was trying to better herself to the church, because at that time they started allowing, I'm not going to say allowing, more minorities, meaning Mexican, Hispanic, started entering our congregation at church.
Now, what denomination were you with?
We were Seventh-day Adventists.
Okay.
And here, when I got into middle school, I started studying religion. That's when I really got into religion, because I wanted to know, you know, again, why I'm better, why I'm part of the Anglo-Saxon race, why my race is more superior. And so I started looking at religion as an answer, because, you know, people, what I would call liberal people, would question me. He says, you're just a kid, why are y'all acting this way? You know, we were black trench coats, combat boots, and we walked around town this way. And they would see us salute each other, you know, the Nazi emblems and everything, and they would ask us, you know, you're just kids, why are you doing this? And so, you know, I'd say, well, it's in the Bible. My dad says it's in the Bible. We're better, and this is who we are. And so I started looking at religion, and the first place I went was to the church, and I found out that our church was divided up. The organization of our church was a member of a group of churches who was a member of a conference. The conference was a member of a continent conference. I found out that we were part of the Georgia Cumberland Conference. And I said, okay, does this include white churches and black churches? Because there was 2 black Adventist churches in Savannah. And they says, no, they're part of the Atlantic Conference. I said, what's the difference? Well, our headquarters is in Collegedale, Tennessee, and their headquarters is in Atlanta. They have their own black schools, their own black colleges, their own black camps. We have our own white churches, our own white colleges, our own white camps. Mm-hmm. You know, and so I'm sitting there looking at this. This is church, you know, worship God, pray, love your neighbor, and we're divided. So that was a reinforcement on we're better than them. You know, we have better buildings, better churches, better camps, better colleges. So it was a reinforcement. Well, then I started studying other churches. I had a run-in with my parents by high school. I left, and I started studying Mormons. They were a big church in our neighborhood. We used to go there and play basketball. Well, it was further endorsed by the Mormons, because again, up until the 1970s, blacks were not allowed to hold the priesthood, and the church was very open and admitted this. That we were superior because of Cain and Abel, and how the blacks had the mark, and and how God was white, Jesus was white. You
So
know,
you moved from Seventh-day Adventists,
Yep.
supported those ideas.
Yep.
Now you moved to Mormons, and you still not doing any critical thinking.
no, because again, there was no black Mormons.
Okay.
You go to Utah, there are no black Mormons. You know,
None.
No, I've met one black Mormon in my life. You know,
I mean, did you question why a black person couldn't obtain the priesthood in
yeah, it's because they're from the lineage of
that
Cain.
same verse
Yeah.
again?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
they're from the lineage of Cain. Cain killed Abel. He put a mark on him. They're to be punished. Which made perfect sense. I mean, if you think about it, women bear the childbirth pains because Eve ate the fruit and tempted man.
Right.
So why wouldn't, if women carried on that suffering, why wouldn't the black man carry on the mark?
Yeah, I see how those things linger on.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you're doing some thinking though. Now,
Oh, yeah.
you're wanting to find out why.
Yeah, well, I mean, also I needed to justify why. I'm being asked questions, everywhere I go. Why are you hated? Well, again, come to high school, the neo-Nazi, the Berlin Wall fell, we started learning our history, really learning how the Nazis actually embraced idolatry, different gods, and we're like, no, man, we believe in Jesus, man. We're not into this. So we actually gave that up, and that's when we discovered the Klan. Klan was a pretty big influence. I had a lot of friends that lived out in the county area where the Klan was, and the only thing that kept me from actually signing the application was I needed a place to live, and my mom was not going to let a Klansman live in her house.
Wow.
But I mean, I supported the Klan. I mean, I believed in their ideology because they did not accept black men, they did not accept Catholics, and they didn't accept Jews.
So were you a lover of Hitler?
I was. I mean, actually, he was back then. Like I said, all through middle school and into high school, he built great planes. I mean, his military strategy to be able to take over a continent in a short period of time, the military genius. I mean, I thought that was a gift from God.
So you really studied him and admired him.
Oh yeah, because I mean, from what he did, he took a country, and again, this is my thought then.
Right.
He took a country that was in a depression, a Great Depression, and brought it to the mightiest empire in the world. Okay. In my mind, that was a gift from God. If you would have told me back then that Hitler was not a prophet of God, I would have. So
what did you all do? I mean, now so you're with this group, the Klan. Mm-hmm. What were you all doing?
Now, when I left the ideology of Nazism, and also at that time the neo-Nazis and the Klan had merged.
Okay.
So they were actually under one hate group, I guess you could say. And also at this time, I kept my head shaved.
Shave your head?
Oh yeah, I was. Yeah. So
you wasn't no part-timer then, you were full-time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember in high school, we used to carry guns, knives, weapons. I mean, it was not uncommon to because we all wore long black trench coats and combat boots.
Were you all getting into fights with other groups and things like this?
I say no because my dad he would talk about how diseases are spread sometimes through contact of people. My dad was a mortician. So he was a mortician. At that time he was a mortician. So
okay.
He would tell us how diseases are common. He used to take me to see dead people, and so I wouldn't. No, you're black. I'm not touching you. You got diseases. So why would I fight with someone and risk catching a disease and hurt myself?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my ideology. I never fought because I didn't want to catch any diseases.
Mm-hmm. But some did.
Yeah, some did. Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, there was a rumor going around about 5 black guys jumping this one small, innocent, helpless white kid, and so we attempted to defend him. I mean, when you have, I think there was that day 15 of us going after this group of black guys, they ran, so I didn't have to touch them.
What are you, a teenager at this time?
Yeah, I was 16, 17 at this time.
Okay. So now you were telling me some point you start liking a girl or wanting to get married or something like that.
Oh yeah, when I was my dad always, he'd always, ever since I was a little kid, if you bring home a black girl, I will disown you. So by this point, I was rebellious. I was a teen. I was actually late teens, early 20s by the point I wanted to get married. And so I started looking around. I was rebellious. I hated everybody. My parents, I couldn't hold down a decent job because I'm not working under a black person. There's just, no, I'm superior. I should be brought in as his boss because I'm superior. Or, my ideology was, the only reason he has a job is because they hadn't seen my skills and they hired him due to affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was my mentality. So I couldn't really hold down a job.
You're really speaking of the mentality of people today, right?
Oh,
today
yeah.
as we speak.
Oh yeah.
But go ahead.
So I was upset at my dad because, again, I had these ideologies, and it all started from him, basically. And then I was just mad at the world, and so I wanted to upset my family, upset the world, so I met this Mexican girl. Well, I knew my dad wasn't going to disown me because she wasn't full black. I mean, she wasn't black. But I knew he wouldn't like it because she's not white either.
So you took the lesser of the evil.
Exactly. So I married her. I took this woman and I married her. Had no real feelings for her.
Did you take her home to meet your dad prior?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What did he say?
Oh, he didn't like it. Me and my dad actually owned a business together, and I hired her as our secretary. Oh, yeah. It didn't go very well. Our business ended up closing down, and we separated ways.
Because of her?
A lot had to do with it, yeah. Yep.
Okay. So all of this is in Savannah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So how did you make your way to North Georgia?
Well, my sister, my youngest sister, decided that she wanted back in the Adventist school system. Public school was, I guess, challenging, or she didn't want to be at home, and Adventist schools you had to go away for. So she ended up going to Dayton Mountain. There's an Adventist school up there. And her roommate there was who is my wife now. So when she graduated, she introduced me to who is my wife now, and my soon-to-be wife. I had no interest in her at that time. She actually called, and we'd talk on the phone. She talked to my sister, and we were talking about Savannah. She said, "I want to come down to Savannah and visit." I said, "No, you don't want to come here." I said, "There's too many black people here. They're hateful. They're ignorant. They smell bad. You don't want to come here." And she says, "No, how can you say that? We're all God's people. How can you be a Christian and believe this?" I said, "I tell you what, you come down here, and I bet within a year, you'll feel the same way and you'll want to go home." So she agreed, and she moved down. She moved down and lived with me, my sister, and my kids. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Well, this ain't so bad. These people aren't so bad. I don't know what your problem is." I said, "Go get a job." So she went and got a job. And I guess about 8 months into her job, she comes home and she says the N-word. Mm-hmm. I says, "Yep, I told you." She says, "No, it's not because I feel that way. It's because of your influence." So she turned the bet around and says, "I bet you can't go to North Georgia and feel the same way." So I ended up moving to North Georgia on a bet.
So why did you pick Walker County?
Well, I was driving along one day, and we were just sightseeing. I never seen the mountains, and I'd actually come down the road that led into Lafayette, and I saw the town sitting down in the valley. I saw the mountains in the background, and I said, "I want to live here." Mm-hmm. So I went and found a house for rent, and that's where I moved to.
Okay. Got your dad up here too?
Yes, I did. He apparently, through years of his ideology, had cost him pretty much his career, and my family really kind of just stayed away from him, I guess. And so I've always stuck to him, and he got real sick, so I moved him up here to take care of him.
But it sounded like you wasn't, or were you still sharing his ideas and things about right at this point?
Because, I mean, even when I come up here, I went back to an Adventist church. and there was no black people. I mean, it was an all-white church, you know, and even when I was married to my first wife. Now, my first wife was Mexican, and we had tried other churches. I went to Baptist for a while. I actually got saved in the Baptist church, and no black people. Black people, according to the preacher, had their own church.
And he actually taught that?
Oh, yeah.
From the pulpit?
From the pulpit. They have their own church. They worship a different way. We are separate because they're different. They're more energetic, more boisterous. So I actually went and visited what I would consider that type, the energetic church, and I didn't like it at all, but so I kind of learned what he was talking about, how they're more energetic, and then I'd watch them on TV.
But have you been to more than one church that teach that type of thing?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, growing up Adventist, becoming a Mormon, studying with the Mormons, and then Baptist. And, of course, my first wife, being Mexican, she dragged me to Mass at the Catholic Church. There was no blacks there.
Yeah.
And then I would work for different people over the years. I actually went to work for a small company who the owners were white, and the only black people they would hire are people to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't even trust them.
So this is right down your alley.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I fit in very...
But this really explains why on Sunday they say it's the most segregated time in America.
Yeah, but then
and it's a transparency. I mean, it's a hypocrisy to preach this thing about Jesus being your Lord and Savior, and you being saved, and you're so holy.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't even have the ability to mix with other people.
Well, I mean, even aside from religion, when I was 21, I went into the Freemasons, and it was the same way there. All blacks can't come in because they have their own lodges, or blacks can't come in due to some chartering reason. They're not recognized by the Grand Lodge of England. They lost their charter, didn't reapply, started their own lodge. The founder was a slave. I mean, the whole 9 yards. I mean, every excuse. And so between the Masons and then, of course, the church and then the people I hung out with, which brings me to my next story. I actually sought out the Klan. I went looking in phone books, looking online, trying to find a member of the Klan, because when I left home, that was the first thing I wanted to do was join the Klan. Well, they actually had a recruitment drive, and I actually marched in a parade with them. I mean, I felt so proud. I'm sticking up for my white heritage, and this was the time they were changing the flag.
Right.
I was so angry. Oh, they're taking away my heritage. My family's from Buffalo, New York, okay? But I'm trying to stick up for my Southern heritage now. So, and I look back now, and it's embarrassing. It's stupid. But back then, I was passionate. How can they give the black man everything they want? Even today, I hear people, and it's the same excuses and arguments that I had when I was younger. Well, why do they have BET, Black Entertainment Television? Why don't they have WET, White Entertainment Television? And like my mom said, well, that sounds like a porn channel. That's why they don't have it.
So you went through Christianity,
Yep.
Seventh-day Adventist,
Yep.
Being a Mormon,
Yep.
went through the Masons,
Yep.
and your heart is still filled with hatred and racism toward African Americans in general, but people of color.
Oh, yeah. I accepted every stereotype. I used to read old comics, of where they portrayed the African American culture.
Yeah.
I used to laugh at the old cartoons, especially Uncle Remus. I used to laugh at the Tar Baby. I said, listen how these people talk. They're so ignorant.
Yeah.
And then just everything, all my beliefs were, like I said, through media, through history. It was just confirmed.
And all that
music.
Other stuff.
My first exposure to rap music. I was like, yeah, these people are animals. All they talk about is drugs, sex, violence. I said, that's all the black people are good for, procreating. I said, I used to look at the housing project. Man, I'd rather be a black woman than anything, because all I got to do is have 9 kids and live the rest of my life in style. You know, those were the ideologies I had. You know. And
Okay, let's talk about a little bit now how your healing began.
Okay.
Because it was evident that you were a pretty sick man at that time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was. Yeah.
So let's talk about what it was that kindly eradicated and start removing some of that racism now.
Well, I got to the point where the hatred was it was overwhelming. I worked in the medical field.
And that's scary, man.
Yep.
That's like a police officer with a Klan uniform under his shirt.
Well, like I said, I worked
and
in
a noose in his gun belt.
But I worked in the medical field, which kind of, it wasn't so bad because I could wear gloves. So I didn't actually have to touch any minority.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Did you ever come on up on a situation where you had to work with a African American and you were on an ambulance or something?
Yes. But again, gloves, gown, and goggles. Put as much barrier between me and them.
But were you sincerely trying to help them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely. It never happened often because I was what I would say fortunate enough to the company I worked for covered the white side of town, so it was very rare. The only time I would, come in contact with those kind of calls would be if they wandered over on our side, as I would say.
That's scary.
So
that's another topic, but
yeah. So it was rare, and then most of the time it's I wore double gloves. I would wear a gown, or I'd carry a change of clothes at work, and I'd change and wash my uniform. Again, working in a funeral home, I mean, I've had to embalm several African Americans, but it was the same thing. Cover my head, cover my eyes, wear a mask, gloves.
But didn't you do that for white people too? Or not as much?
Not as much.
Oh, okay.
I would wear one pair of gloves instead of two.
Wow.
I wouldn't wear a gown. I wouldn't worry about washing my uniform between calls.
Okay. So now at a point, you came in touch with this guy at a Chinese shop.
Yep.
Chinese
Come on,
restaurant. Give it to us before we run out of time.
Well, I went into, like I said again, repeated the same story. I went into a Chinese restaurant
Here in Dalton.
Yeah. And he started, I saw his wife first. She was covered, which I thought was just so amazing.
In a Muslim scarf.
Yeah, in a Muslim scarf, yeah. And so when I started talking to him, we were talking about my experience on the ambulance and Palestine. How, hey, I like to be in that kind of environment, really help people. And so we started talking about Quran, and so I started reading Quran.
And you had never read the Quran before?
Never.
Did you know anything about it?
No, I knew people that had it. I knew it was a book for Muslims, but I've never really...
Did you think about Muslims like you thought about black people?
No, because, see, Muslims or Arabs are not black.
So you thought all Muslims was Arabs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know. But yeah, see, Muslims or Arabs are they're mostly white. They just got tanned by the sun because of the hot climate.
That's what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I thought. So anyway, so I started studying the Quran, and I loved the book. It was moving. It was the greatest thing I ever. It was the greatest thing I ever experienced. What I felt inside was so amazing. I mean, because everything made sense. Religion made sense. So, like I said, I wanted to be a Muslim so bad. And this guy, this guy was like, no, you need to study some more. You need to study some more. So I was like, oh no. So I called the masjid. And
called the mosque, right?
The mosque. I called the mosque, and of course you responded, returned my call.
A black man.
I didn't know you were on the phone.
Okay.
So I what did I say? I want to become a Muslim. What do I need to do? And so you over the phone gave me shahada.
And that means I gave you
the declaration of faith
to become a Muslim.
To become a Muslim.
Yeah.
So the next day you told me meet me at 12:30 at the mosque. I was there at 12:29. I mean, I remember looking at my watch when I pulled in. I mean, the door was locked. I couldn't get in. I beat on the door. You answered the phone. You answered the door, and you said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah." I talked to Hamid. I'm looking for Hamid. He says, "You said I'm Hamid, And I said, hey, I'm Randy, and you reached out and hugged me. And I'm sitting there like, I have never touched a black man before in my life. But the influence of the Quran, I mean, and my desire to be a Muslim so bad, it melted my heart.
So what did you think now?
I was in shock because I was like,
You wasn't gloved up.
no, I was in shock because I was like, what's going on? You know, what's happening here? I mean, I didn't know what to think, but all I felt was this warming sensation over my chest. I just felt like, wow, this is not bad. I mean, this is the most amazing experience of my life.
You didn't explode.
No.
You didn't catch a disease.
No. But
So somebody been lying to you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then when I sat down and I saw more African Americans, and then I saw Oriental, then I saw Asians, and then the next man that hugged me was Egyptian. And then all of a sudden, after the Jumu'ah prayer, everybody hugged me, welcomed me to Islam. I remember going home, and my wife tells the story much better, but I remember going home, and she says, where you've been? I said, I went to the mosque in Dalton. I remember she started to cry because she knew I'd become Muslim, and the first thing I said is, I better never hear the N-word in this house ever again.
Alhamdulillah.
And that was it.
That's good.
Yep.
So did you, after that, did you go back now and tell your father that you had accepted Islam?
The first phone call I made was basically I cussed him out.
Curse your father out?
Yep.
Why?
Because he had filled my head with all this disbelief, all this falsehood. I had went through living heck all my life. I got beat up. You know, I'd been hateful to a race of people that I never took the time to get to know. You know, and as I later learned through studying, you know, the Muslim country incorporated North Africa. You know, the first university was in Timbuktu.
That's right.
Started by Africans.
That's right.
Education started amongst the black man. And I was just, my mind was blown away. I felt so embarrassed. I hid for a long time. I mean, I wouldn't even talk to my dad because of my hate. I just couldn't believe that this is how I was.
But can you imagine how many other people out there who are being influenced by people who think the way your father was thinking, and because of that, they have totally blocked out any type of access to people of color? Like you were told African Americans was ignorant, and now you're learning that they were some of the beginners of knowledge.
Yep.
You know.
It's like I said, it's more embarrassing than anything. You know, again, when all this came out, I was trying to hold this in and suppress it because I didn't want anyone to know. And like I said, it actually came out by accident. You know.
Well, tell us the story how it came out.
I got off work. I actually got off work, and it was Ramadan, and you know, this past Ramadan, I wanted to make as many prayers in the mosque as I could. That was my goal. See how many prayers can I make in the mosque. So I got off work and I was racing to the mosque because it was time for Maghrib prayer. Well, I was running out of gas, but I didn't want to stop to get gas. So I kept making dua. I said, please, just get me to Dalton. I just want to get to Dalton. I know I'm below E, but just get me to Dalton. Well, I made it to Dalton and I pulled into the racetrack. And there was this car in front of me, or actually to the side and to the front a little bit. And I noticed that the woman was wearing a headscarf. So I was pumping my gas, and then I heard this guy talking to her. And I went up, and I saw he covered his head, he was wearing a kufi. So I went over to his Ramadan. So I went up there and greeted him. And he's like, wow, there's Muslims here in Dalton? I was like, yeah, man, we got a mosque and everything. So he had... what I had overheard him talking to his wife was, lock the door. We're in Dalton. There's a lot of Klansmen here, and they don't like black people. So I went and invited him to our mosque. Well, he came to our mosque and visited, and I, showed him. We made prayer together. We prayed together. And as he was leaving, he's like, "Yeah, it's amazing because I just made this comment about." Klansmen and everything. I said, yeah, man, I was there. I actually marched with the Klan, and I said, this brother that comes to the mosque, he was actually the first black man I ever touched. And the next day, of course, I saw you at Fajr Prayer, and I was like, hey, man, this guy came yesterday, and I told him you were the first black man I ever touched.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I mean, from what I'm hearing you say is that, which really proves to me and strengthens my conviction in this religion, because we've always said that Islam is the solution to racism.
Oh, most definitely.
There's no other institution that removes that barrier like Islam, and it removes it instantly when you're ready to pray.
You know, I find it amazing, and my wife will tell you, you know, from a guy that went from, again, marching with the Klan, accepting Nazism as an ideology, accepting the superiority of the white race. You know, how many times did I go to a mosque this Ramadan that was majority African American and celebrate and pray?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's totally amazing.
You know, I was thinking about your situation. Even if someone tried to hold on to those ideas in a mosque, I don't think that they would be able to, because it's just so much of a mixture of people there from all over the world, and you have to touch them.
Yeah.
When you stand next to them in prayer, you're touching them.
Yeah, feet to feet and shoulder
You're
to shoulder.
shaking hands. You're hugging, like you're saying. And, you know, that's what God says. You know, do good. Do a good deed, and it will remove a bad deed. I wanted to read, before we end, one verse from the Quran that kind of speaks about what we were talking about, and then we will continue. It's in chapter 49 called Al-Hujra. And it says, O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you, and God has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things. I mean, that's equality. That the most honored of you, God said, not the whitest of you, or the reddest of you, or the blackest of you, but the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous. I mean, what a religion, that it doesn't focus on ethnicity, but it focuses on the righteousness of a human being. And you can rise to the top in Islam. There's no ceiling in Islam based on color.
You know, I think every day of my life, I mean, there's not a day I don't go by that I don't think about this and think of where I come from. And some days I get so angry, because if I had took the time and got to know these different cultures, look at the knowledge I've lost. Where would I be today with the knowledge that I could have had?
Yeah, but in a way, too, it has prepared you to talk about the issue.
It has, but it's also taught me how to raise my own kids.
Right.
You know,
right.
my kids are, you know, I've told them, you know, we've had to talk. They're at the age to get to talk, and I told them, I said, if you bring home a black girl, you would make me proud. I'd be honored.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because my dad was the opposite. And so I don't encourage them to go out and just find, you know, minority women. But if that's their choice, if that's
right.
where Allah leads them.
You letting them know there's nothing wrong with it.
No, there's definitely nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, and they beautiful children. I mean, they mingle and mix with everybody. They don't meet no strangers. I can tell you that right now. So, like I said before, I think your experience is really just evident of how powerful Islam can be in the way of removing this thing called racism in people's heart.
Right.
Because it sounds like you were very embedded in discrimination and prejudice. But it's a trial. It's a struggle. It's something that you pass through. Many of us, we pass through other avenues, sometimes worse than that. But it's all about being guided and ending up into, a righteous place.
Well, the thing that the greatest blessing in my life, you know, is I don't consider myself a white man. I don't consider my fellow Muslims as black, or we're all just Muslims. I mean, the stereotypes have been removed from me. You know, I don't look at anybody's skin color anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, because we're just Muslim.
And that was just smooth. Once you accepted it, it was over with.
That's it.
That's right. So, do you ever meet people now that you find that's in the position where you were, like yesterday, and thinking with those type of ideas?
I've met people at work. I've been partnered with people at work, and I've actually gone to my supervisor and asked for transfers
because
I refuse to work around it.
Yeah.
I've lost, I think, 34 years. I was 34 when I became Muslim. I've lost 34 years of knowledge because of my ignorance. I'm not going to lose another second.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're definitely in a good position to educate. And I think you also, what you talked about today kind of proves what we still see in our society today. That, like the guy was saying earlier, that a lot of this type of thinking is perpetuated by verses that people have read in Scripture. And they, like he said, go off the radar by putting a religious cover on it.
That brings me to a good point, and it still irritates me because I talk to my family all the time. My stepdad is Jewish, and he's big into, well, we need to bring all the Jews back to Israel. And I said, well, I will agree with you if you help me to raise money to go to Ethiopia and return the tribe of Dan to Israel. Well, the tribe of Dan are all black men. They spent 1,300 years in Ethiopia. The sun and the temperature have darkened their skin. And he says, no, they're not Jewish because they're black. Now, these people have been Jews, and they can trace their ancestors back to Israel, but they're not considered Jews because of the color of their skin. Racism.
Yeah.
And I asked my mom today, how many black people do you have in your church? And she says, well, that shouldn't matter. If they don't want to come here, we can't make them.
Maybe they're not welcome.
I said, exactly. I said, well, how about taking the two churches, the two conferences, and joining them? How about inviting a black preacher to preach in your church? Oh, we can't have that. They're different. They come from, and like I tell my mom, I said, Mom, just give it up, accept Islam.
It's the only solution.
Yep.
And you talking about the token guy.
Yep.
When you grew up in the church,
he's still there.
Is he?
Yes, he
We
is.
also had, we didn't call him a token, but our church was primarily all black.
Yep.
But it was one little short guy that ran around town. I think he was a little mischievous, but on Sunday he would always find his way down on Emory Street, and he called himself a preacher. So they would allow him to sit with the other preachers, and they would always give him a few minutes to say something. And me and my friends would be like, wow, man, what is this? Who is this guy? It's just fascinating to see somebody different in there every now and then, So on the flip side, we also experienced the same thing, growing up. I mean, that's all we saw.
I just think that, I think I told you the story. I used to work for Pepsi-Cola, and I went into Pepsi-Cola one day, and it was around Christmas time, and the guys the repairmen, on their truck, they had a picture of a black Santa Claus. I went into the director of the plant, and I said, either you remove that or I'm leaving. I said, everybody knows Santa Claus is white, and I'm not going to have them deface the sanctity and the holiness of Santa.
That's funny.
I was told, well, there's a door.
Oh, really? Because they wasn't removing it.
That's right.
But money sometimes means more than
That's right.
these principles we talk about. So now, since you've been in Islam, I mean, I know you can see the difference.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And this verse I just read out of the Quran, I mean, to me, it's the essence of what we're talking about right now, that God has created different nations and tribes, and not that we should hate one another, but that we may, really learn from one another.
Oh, yeah.
And I know since I've been a Muslim and traveled around Europe and different places that, everybody brings a quality, their own flavor to the religion. The religion, not terminating the religion, but you can learn different cultures, different things from different people in Islam, which really beautifies the religion.
Well, no matter what happens in my life, I know that because of this transformation, because of my giving up the hatred, my wife become a Muslim. That was the greatest experience. My wife becoming a Muslim was better than me becoming a Muslim. Because, and like I said, she saw a change, and she knew that something that would eradicate the extreme thinking that I had,
Right.
you know, it can only come from God.
Okay, now what about your father now? You know, I have met him a couple of times. He seemed to be the perfect gentleman.
When I become Muslim, and after, like I said, I cussed him out, and after I took him a Quran, and after I told him I didn't want his hatred and his negativity around my kids, he quickly started changing his tune. Now, every so often I'll still hear, well, you know, Obama, you know, he's a Muslim. Well, maybe he's not a Muslim, but well, it's not because he's black. He's just not a good president. So he doesn't, you know, and every once
So
in a while.
he's easing up a little bit.
Oh, he's changed. I mean, he's definitely a different person. He's not the hardcore racist he was.
So you and him talk a lot about
Oh yeah, you know, and like I said,
and you don't want to destroy that relationship.
No, and the Quran is very firm on that. You know,
Right.
you have to be good to your parents.
Right.
You know, but my dad is a different person, and he says that perhaps the environment he was in Savannah was negative. Because, like I said, down there, unfortunately, there's a lot of projects, and so you get that negative vibe or the negative outlook from the projects, you know,
Right.
the drugs and stuff like that. He's moved up here, and he sees something totally different. He sees hardworking black men and women, and he sees a lot of what he called the superior race, collecting welfare, you know, drunk on the streets, you know, lazy, and it's changed his outlook.
Well, when you're blinded, they say you see what you want to see.
That's right.
So we have to make dua, supplications,
Yes.
from your father.
Oh yeah.
The times I did meet him, I didn't know any of this, but it really changed, you know.
But you know, nowadays he says, I like black men. They're great people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, his mechanic is a black man.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I'm not taking my car to anybody else. And his whole ideology changed.
Well, I mean, that's what Islam, it comes to conform.
Yep.
I mean, if you have all this type of negativity, and we come, especially people like you and I,
Yep.
who accept Islam, who grew up as something else,
Yep.
sometimes we bring baggage into the religion, different cultures, different stereotypes and all this stuff, but in order to be a good Muslim, you have to remove that.
Now, again, my dad's a Christian, and my dad proved to me through the Bible that God was white and that black men were cursed. A couple months ago, he took the same Bible to show that Jesus was a black man.
Oh, really?
He took the verse that says that he had hair like wool, like lamb's wool.
Well, the Bible says that.
Yep.
That his hairs was like lamb wool.
He says that Jesus was dark skinned, olive skin is what the Bible says.
Well,
I said, where was this verse 20 years ago?
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I think you have a beautiful story, you know.
Again, I'm ashamed. I really am ashamed for the damage I think that I believe I caused to other people through my ignorance.
Well, I know you're only talking about it today so other people can learn from it. I understand that. And we know that God forgives all sins and everything that came before Islam. So I like to especially let people know that you're a big asset to our community. I mean, the work you're doing in the Scouts and your family there all the time, participating in all our classes and our activities there. And that's the way it should be when someone enters a community. They should be a plus and not a negative. So, you know, the time I've known you, you just have an excellent behavior, and it's speaking about what, when someone come into the religion sincerely, what it can clean you up.
Well, like I say this often, and I don't think I say it enough. Thank you again, because Allah definitely guided me to you, and you definitely were an influence.
All praise is due to Him.
All praise is due to Allah.
I'm just happy to be that first.
And I think the brother that was at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, it's all a plan.
So, you know, and again, my family and I have never been happier than we are as Muslims.
Okay. With that, we're going to close. For anyone who would like a copy of any of our broadcasts, this one or any one that we do here, you can call 706 459-1010, 706-459-1010. I want to thank Brother Ayyub for coming, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and reward us for our effort. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
You have been listening to Understanding Islam, brought to you by the Understanding Islam Dawah Foundation. If you have any questions or comments, please call 706-459-1010 or email us at understandingislam411@yahoo.com. You can also visit our website at www.dawah.info. Join us next week for Understanding Islam.